Hello there and welcome back to Movie Recap. Today I'll be reviewing Blitz, a 2011 action/crime flick. Warning, spoilers ahead. Please be cautious. Before we begin, we ask that you subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to get future alerts. The film begins by introducing Sergeant Tom Brandt, a detective who had just awoken from a night's sleep when he sat down to drink and heard a commotion outside that turned out to be a group of mischievous kids who wanted to damage a car. He came down from his apartment and beat the kids with a hockey stick before giving advice that if it's wrong to pick a fight, at least pick the right weapon. But because of this, the decisions he makes next will influence how Sergeant Brandt and the police will fare. When Sergeant Brandt was in his room, Elizabeth, one of his assistant members, came to ask for advice on the physical recovery she was doing after her disguise as a drug addict was finished. Then another superior visited Sergeant Brandt and gave him a newspaper about his deadline on the front page. Then Brandt stood up and said the issue is that this is the only job he can do, and if he is fired, then there will be a lot of damage he will do. The decision he makes thereafter will decide Sergeant Brandt and the police's destiny. When Sergeant Brandt was in his room, Elizabeth, one of his assistant members, came to ask for advice on the physical recovery she was doing after her disguise as a drug addict was finished. Then another superior visited Sergeant Brandt and gave him a newspaper about his deadline on the front page. Then Brandt stood up and said the issue is that this is the only job he can do. If he is fired, there will be a lot of damage he will do after. Doing so, he fled, leaving Sandra dead. Brandt and other police officers heard this, though. Next day, their office welcomed a new employee named Porter Nash. Porter is a sergeant who was promoted to inspector and is in charge of replacing Inspector Robert, who was on leave after the death of his wife. Porter was not welcomed by other members. Meanwhile, at Elizabeth's home, she was visited by an acquaintance. Sergeant Brandt was also present at the crime scene and interviewed a witness for questioning. Lee also offered to assist him so long as the victim did not pass away because he and his pals beat others to unconsciousness last night. Elizabeth then asked Sergeant Brandt for assistance with that, and he suggested that Ellie contact a detective he knew named Craig Stokes elsewhere. Harold Dunlop was a journalist who had received a call from someone claiming to have information about the police shooting case. The caller claimed to be targeting 8 more police officers for death, and he had called the journalists on purpose so that his action would be publicized. On the same day, the man shot another policeman who was sitting in a car. This news also disturbed the members of the police force. Inspector Porter then began approaching Sergeant Brandt to familiarize themselves so that they could work together at the office. They began tracking the bullets and weapons used, the testimony of witnesses who saw the perpetrator's face, and CCTV footage, while Sergeant Brandt looked for clues in the field by visiting illegal gun dealers and street people who might have clues related to this increasingly crazy case. Brandt then meets up with an acquaintance named Redner, a homeless man who makes money selling information to the police. However, he's the wrong person to want to extort money from Brandt. After a bit of torture, Redner finally opens up and reveals that a gym goer once burned a police dog to post on YouTube and said it was an exercise. Hearing that, Brandt went there to question the manager. He finally got a name. Then Brandt invited Porter to join the investigation. The two of them went to an apartment owned by Barry Weiss, the suspected cop killer. They searched the residence but did not find anything. Sergeant Brandt then remembered Barry's face. It turned out that Barry was the person he had beaten at the pool table a year ago. After that, they left the apartment. Grant told Porter to keep an eye on Barry, maybe because the incident a year ago made Barry have a grudge with the police. Because his house was visited by the police, Barry immediately got ready for his next plan. He packed his things, put them in the trunk of a car that he parked elsewhere. Inspector Robert, tired of being on leave, opted to return to the office, and his request was granted even though Porter Nash had replaced him. On his way home, Barry followed Robert silently. He entered the house pretending to be a cable TV operator. He also managed to lure Robert to open the door to his apartment and immediately pointed a gun at Robert, but was quickly able to block him before the gun was fired. They also fought in the house. Robert, who had taken the hammer, tried to attack Barry, but unfortunately Barry was able to grab the hammer and hit Robert's head 11 times. After killing Robert, Barry casually watched TV in Robert's house. He also took a shower, took things he could use, and finally left the scene while burning the apartment. After that, he also called a reporter and told him what he had just done, telling him that at the scene of the fire there was a dead policeman with his head crushed by a hammer. Fortunately, the reporter had recorded their conversation, and Barry referred to himself as Blitz. The news made headlines in the newspaper. Sergeant Brandt, who had just come to the office, was shocked after being told that Inspector Robert was dead. On the other hand, Redner was looking for clues in the trash at Barry's apartment. There, he found a clue because it was Barry's parking ticket, a place Barry used to store other cars. His trunks were used to store goods. Rather than went there, searched the car, opened the trunk, and found evidence. Realizing he would not get any money if this information was given to Sergeant Grant, he contacted Harold Dunlop, the journalist who wrote the story about Barry. He asked for $50,000 for the information he had regarding the real name of Blitz and also the evidence he found. Elsewhere, Sergeant Brandt and Porter examined the items left over from the fire at Robert's house. Unfortunately, no fingerprints could be taken from the fire, but from the items they both found pieces of clothing with Peacock Jim written on them. Brad immediately sent officers to check whether Inspector Robert was a member there. On the other hand, Elizabeth, who wanted to help John, went to see Craig Stokes, a detective recommended by Brent. Craig revealed that the victim of the beating committed by John and his friends was still alive. Elizabeth also asked the detective not to arrest John because he was still a child. However, Craig asked for a reward for that. He wanted Elizabeth to accompany him for a drink tonight at the police station. Brent got a clue that Inspector Robert had never been a member at the gym. From all this, Brent only thought Barry Weiss was the culprit, so he asked other police officers for help in finding Barry Weiss's dead. Police records showed that Barry was recorded as a person who often made trouble and was arrested several times by the police. Meanwhile, elsewhere, as agreed, Redner showed the evidence he found to Harold for $50,000. However, when they inspected the car, Barry saw it and felt that the secret was no longer a secret. So after the two of them left, Barry packed everything up and left nothing there. He also followed the two of them to a bar, and when Redner counted the money in the toilet, Barry appeared to scare him. Redner said that he had not mentioned Barry's name to the reporter, but Barry replied, "Relax, because I only killed the police." Barry then asked how Redner knew it was him. Redner said that he got Barry's address from Peacock Jim and then checked Barry's dumpster for clues, but he found a parking ticket along with another address, and he also saw a lot of stuff in the car. Redner, who was scared to death, said repeatedly that he had not mentioned Barry's name to reporters. Barry pretended to leave, but he quickly killed Redner by drowning him in the toilet, then took the money. This place soon became a crime scene. Harold was questioned by Sergeant Brandt and Inspector Porter. Harold told them everything that happened until he found Redner dead there. Harold also told them about the car full of evidence which was parked in place. They both went straight to the car, but because Barry had moved all his things, they got nothing. The CCTV in the parking lot also did not work because the memory was full. At the office, Sergeant Brandt made a list of all the officers who had arrested Barry. He got the name Sandra Bates, Barry's first victim, who apparently had arrested Barry in a violent case. Brandt also got another name, Tio Nelson, the person Barry shot while Tio was sitting in the car. They were both shocked when the other officers' names that came up were Inspector Robert and Elizabeth. They immediately ordered the squad to send officers to Elizabeth's house. Sometime earlier, Elizabeth kept her promise to have a drink with Detective Craig. However, she didn't realize that Barry was watching them. After the date, when Elizabeth was about to enter her house, Barry attacked from behind. Fortunately, the attack missed. Ellie gave a little resistance, and they both fell down. When Barry was about to attack again, John came to ambush him, but he lost and died because his neck was broken by Barry. The Barry ran away after that. Shortly after, Elizabeth's house became a crime scene. Ellie told Porter that the culprit was a white adult. Brandt was immediately convinced that it was Barry Weiss. The next day, Brandt and Porter searched Barry Weiss' apartment, and they found out that Barry had packed up and fled. The police then issued a warrant and published a photo of Barry Weiss as a suspect. The police immediately made an arrest by going to the hotel where Barry Weiss was staying. Barry, who knew about it, tried to escape. He chased Brett through the streets. This chase involved a lot of police officers. The Barry, who realized he couldn't run anymore, decided to surrender. Fortunately, the other police quickly caught up with them before Brandt, who was already angry, did something to Barry. At the police station, Barry was taken into the interrogation room. He was asked a few questions by Brandt and Porter, but in his arrogant way, Barry asked for a lawyer, Brett, and also said he wanted to update his status on Facebook. When Barry was with his lawyer, Sergeant Brandt, and Porter were reminded that they only had 48 hours to press charges, otherwise Barry would be released. The Porter reveals that Barry is so clever that he's managed to erase forensic evidence and left nothing at home and at the hotel where he was staying. That makes them pessimistic because they don't have strong evidence. If they don't have evidence, then Barry will get out of prison laughing. Brent offers to settle the case without the law, meaning Brent will take care of Barry on his own, but Porter doesn't agree to do that. Brent then meets Barry in the interrogation room, reminding him of the incident 1 year ago where Brent beat Barry to pulp at the pool table. Brent had deliberately provoked Barry's emotions at the time. The next morning, since there was no evidence to arrest Barry, he was released. He arrogantly walked among the police officers and acted like a celebrity in front of the waiting journalists, but Barry's movements were under police surveillance. At his home, Barry prepared everything to carry out the action again on the day of Robert's funeral. Many police officers were present, including Barry, who disguised himself as a member of the police, came without the knowledge of the police because Brent had previously upset him in prison. It made Brent his next target. When Sergeant Brent left the funeral, Barry followed him. Brent then went to place and Barry still followed him with a gun ready to use. Brent went to the roof of the building where Barry was ready to shoot him in the head, but it turned out that he was following Inspector. The Porter appeared from behind and he attacked Barry with a crowbar. They dueled, and you know who won. Barry says he's going to report them both and make sure their faces are in the papers tomorrow morning. But what Barry doesn't realize is that Brad set him up so that the case could be solved with impunity. Brad then shot Barry in the head using the same weapon he used to kill the police, so that way it would be considered a case of police murder committed by Blues Brand. Porter and Brent then leave the scene, ensuring that Barry's case will remain unsolved and the movie ends.